People often assume that age naturally brings wisdom, humility, patience, and emotional balance. In many cases, that is true. Over time, healthy people tend to gain perspective through loss, responsibility, relationships, disappointment, and reflection. They become less reactive, less self-centered, and more interested in peace than control. They learn that life is not about constant validation, and they gradually build identity around deeper values such as integrity, love, purpose, resilience, and meaning. But when people ask, do narcissists get worse with age, many survivors of narcissistic abuse describe a very different reality. Instead of softening, some narcissistic individuals seem to become harsher, more bitter, more controlling, more paranoid, and more openly cruel. For many adult children, former partners, and family members, this shift is not just painful. It is confusing. It raises difficult questions about narcissistic personality patterns, aging, emotional immaturity, and whether time ever heals a person who refuses to reflect. This article draws on the ideas in the transcript you shared and expands them into a long-form, SEO-friendly piece exploring why narcissists often appear to get worse, not better, with age. To understand why narcissists may worsen over time, it helps to start with a basic truth about emotional development. Aging and maturing are not the same thing. A person can grow older without growing inwardly. They can accumulate years without accumulating wisdom. Emotional maturity does not come from birthdays, gray hair, or life experience alone. It comes from what a person does with those experiences. Healthy development requires self-reflection. It requires accountability. It requires the ability to tolerate shame without collapsing, to recognize one's own harmful behavior, and to use pain as a teacher rather than a weapon. Narcissistic individuals, especially those with entrenched patterns, often resist exactly those processes. They defend against self-awareness because their inner world is organized around protecting a fragile, inflated, and highly defended self-image. As a result, they may age physically while remaining emotionally rigid, reactive, and developmentally stuck. This is one of the most important reasons an aging narcissist can seem more difficult over time. Healthy people are often softened by life because they allow life to humble them. They process grief. They revise assumptions. They apologize. They discover that they are not always right and that relationships matter more than winning. Narcissists, by contrast, often experience life as an ongoing threat to identity. Instead of learning from mistakes, they externalize blame. Instead of reflecting on conflict, they reinterpret events in ways that preserve superiority. Instead of saying, "I was wrong," they say, "You misunderstood me, you made me do it, everyone is against me," or "People are just jealous." When this becomes a lifelong pattern, time does not produce growth. It produces entrenchment. Another reason narcissists often get worse with age is that aging threatens the very things many narcissists rely on to maintain their identity. Narcissism is deeply tied to external validation, often called narcissistic supply. This supply may come from beauty, youth, sexual desirability, career status, influence, admiration, physical strength, intellectual superiority, public attention, social power, financial control, or the ability to dominate others. For a narcissist, these external qualities are not just enjoyable. They are structurally important. They help hold together the false self, the image they present to the world and often to themselves. When those sources of supply begin to weaken, the narcissist does not necessarily respond with humility or acceptance. Often, they respond with panic, rage, envy, deeper control, or intensified emotional manipulation. This is why the question, "Why do narcissists get worse with age?" matters so much. Aging naturally involves loss. No one keeps youth forever. Physical attractiveness changes. Professional relevance may decline after retirement. Bodies become more vulnerable. Social attention shifts to younger people. Influence can diminish. Illness, dependence, and mortality become harder to ignore. For emotionally healthy people, these changes can be painful, but they can also lead to a more grounded identity. A healthy person may shift from needing to be admired to wanting to be connected. They may let go of performance and lean into meaning. They may discover dignity in honesty, wisdom, contribution, and presence. But narcissists often struggle to make that transition because they never built a stable inner identity beneath the external performance. When the scaffolding weakens, so does their psychological stability. That instability frequently comes out as anger. Many survivors notice that older narcissists become more critical, more entitled, more rigid, and more hostile toward the people closest to them. They may attack younger family members, compete with their own children, resent their partner's independence, or become obsessed with perceived disrespect. This is not random. Younger people often represent what the narcissist is losing: time, beauty, opportunity, mobility, relevance, attention, or possibility. That can activate intense envy. Narcissists often struggle profoundly with envy because they experience another person's strength as a personal wound. Instead of appreciating the growth of others, they may try to diminish it. Instead of blessing the younger generation, they may criticize, belittle, sabotage, or guilt them. This is especially common in narcissistic parents who expect lifelong emotional devotion and obedience from adult children. Adult children of narcissists often enter midlife still holding on to a quiet hope that their parent will one day soften. They may think that age, retirement, illness, or the arrival of grandchildren will finally bring perspective. They may imagine a future apology, a tender conversation, or some late-life recognition of the harm that was done. That hope can be deeply human. It reflects the child's longing for repair, not foolishness. But many eventually encounter a painful reality. The narcissistic parent does not become more reflective with age. Instead, they become more demanding. They rewrite history more aggressively. They lean harder into victimhood. They intensify guilt, triangulation, and blame. They may insist that the family owes them more because of their age, their suffering, their sacrifices, or their status. And when adult children pull back to protect their peace, the parent may portray them as cruel, selfish, or ungrateful. One reason this pattern intensifies is that life consequences begin to accumulate. In youth or early adulthood, narcissistic traits can sometimes be masked by charm, attractiveness, ambition, competence, charisma, or social skill. A person may appear magnetic, successful, or impressive enough that others overlook the underlying exploitation. Their manipulation may be interpreted as strength. Their entitlement may be mistaken for self-esteem. Their lack of empathy may be hidden beneath image management. But over decades, patterns become harder to hide. Relationships break down. Friends drift away. Colleagues lose patience. Former admirers become disillusioned. Children grow up and begin naming what they experienced. Ex-partners establish boundaries. Siblings compare notes. The narcissist starts facing the long-term results of a life built around control rather than reciprocity. This is where things often become psychologically explosive. A healthy person who finds themselves isolated in later life might ask, "How did I get here? What part did I play?" A narcissist is more likely to conclude, "Everyone betrayed me." Rather than seeing burned bridges as a consequence of their own behavior, They interpret distancing as proof of other people's cruelty, weakness, disloyalty, or jealousy. This is why older narcissists may seem increasingly bitter. They are not only losing supply, they are also confronting a reality that does not match the grandiose story they have told themselves. They believed they would always be admired, desired, obeyed, feared, or centered. When life stops cooperating with that fantasy, resentment grows. Bitterness becomes a key feature of the aging narcissist. They may complain constantly, not in the vulnerable way of a hurt person seeking comfort, but in the accusatory way of someone demanding that reality itself apologize. They may resent younger coworkers, younger relatives, their partner's friendships, their children's marriages, or anyone who seems free, happy, or hopeful. Joy in others can become intolerable because it throws their own emptiness into sharper contrast. They may begin policing the moods of the household, punishing others for being happy, making celebrations about themselves, or introducing conflict whenever attention moves away from them. This can make family gatherings exhausting and confusing, especially when outsiders still see the narcissist as the elder, the parent, or the one who has been through so much. Another major factor in why narcissists often worsen with age is emotional rigidity. The longer a person practices a defensive pattern, the more automatic it becomes. A narcissist who has spent 30, 40, or 50 years lying, projecting, gaslighting, manipulating, dominating, and reframing reality in self-serving ways does not suddenly become psychologically flexible without intentional treatment and real motivation. In fact, the opposite often happens. Their defenses harden. Their stories become more fixed. Their inability to tolerate contradiction grows. They become more offended by boundaries, more reactive to change, and less willing to consider any perspective that threatens control. What once may have looked like occasional arrogance becomes chronic rigidity. What once seemed like defensiveness becomes a full identity structure. That rigidity is often reinforced by success. Many narcissistic behaviors work in the short term. Intimidation can silence people. Charm can win people over. Victim narratives can recruit sympathy. Financial control can keep others trapped. Rage can shut down disagreement. If these tactics have worked for decades, the narcissist has little incentive to change. In their mind, the system worked. They got what they wanted. They maintained dominance. So when age weakens the effectiveness of these tactics, they do not necessarily question the tactics themselves. They often escalate them. This is why some aging narcissists become more overt. They no longer have the energy or subtlety to maintain the polished mask. Their patience decreases. Their frustration increases. Their entitlement becomes harder to hide. Family members may say, they got worse, but sometimes what really happened is that the narcissist became less able to disguise who they had always been. This distinction matters. Survivors often spend years trying to understand whether the narcissist truly changed or whether the mask slipped. In many cases, both can be true. Aging can intensify existing pathology because it adds more threat, more loss, more envy, and more desperation. But it can also reduce the person's ability to present themselves as charming, benevolent, or socially acceptable. The manipulative spouse who once used seduction may switch to guilt. The narcissistic parent who once maintained a respectable public image may become openly cruel behind closed doors and less careful about being exposed. The aging executive who once drew admiration from power may become resentful and tyrannical after retirement. These are not always new personalities. They are often more exposed versions of long-standing dynamics. The issue of retirement deserves special attention because it can be particularly destabilizing for narcissistic individuals whose identity is built around status and authority. A person who spent decades being obeyed at work may feel psychologically shattered when they no longer hold a title, office, or daily stream of external validation. If there was little inner life, little genuine intimacy, and little capacity for mutuality outside performance, retirement can feel like annihilation rather than rest. This may lead to increased control at home. The narcissist may begin micromanaging the household, criticizing their spouse constantly, picking fights, intruding into adult children's choices, or demanding attention to compensate for the loss of workplace relevance. The family may feel like the narcissist came home from work and never left, not just physically, but psychologically, with all the domination and none of the boundaries. Physical decline can create similar instability. For a narcissist whose identity depends on strength, health, beauty, or independence, illness and aging can be profoundly humiliating. Healthy vulnerability requires surrender, interdependence, and acceptance, all of which can be hard enough for anyone. For a narcissist, they can feel unbearable. Needing help may evoke shame. Losing mobility may evoke rage. Medical limitations may provoke blame. The narcissist may lash out at caregivers, accuse others of neglect, exaggerate or weaponize illness, or swing between grandiose denial and self-pity. Some become more dependent while simultaneously becoming more abusive. This is one reason caregiving in narcissistic family systems can be so devastating. The person who needs care may respond not with gratitude or humility, but with entitlement, criticism, and escalating emotional exploitation. There is also a profound existential dimension to narcissistic aging. Aging confronts every person with mortality, limitation, and the fact that no one remains the center of the universe forever. For emotionally healthy people, this can deepen compassion and spiritual seriousness. For narcissists, it can activate terror. The narcissistic structure often protects against deep feelings of emptiness, worthlessness, shame, and fragmentation. External supply helps keep those states at bay. But as life narrows and distractions weaken, the inner void becomes harder to avoid. Rather than facing grief honestly, the narcissist may project it outward. They may become more accusing, more cynical, more suspicious, more obsessed with past slights, and more hostile toward anyone who cannot fill the emptiness for them. They may cling harder to control because control is the only thing that temporarily quiets their internal panic. This helps explain why so many survivors describe aging narcissists as increasingly paranoid. Paranoia in this context does not always mean psychosis. It can look like chronic suspicion, relentless assumptions of bad motives, exaggerated grievance, and the belief that others are disrespecting, abandoning, or conspiring against them. Because narcissists often cannot metabolize shame internally, they perceive attack outside themselves. If a child sets a boundary, it becomes betrayal. If a partner disagrees, it becomes disrespect. If friends become less available, it becomes rejection. If younger people receive attention, it becomes injustice. Their world becomes organized around injury. They are not just hurt, they are wronged. Not just disappointed, persecuted. This frame protects the ego but destroys relationships. The role of shame cannot be overstated. Beneath grandiosity, narcissism is often fueled by profound shame that the person cannot consciously tolerate. This shame may come from early trauma, chronic invalidation, attachment wounds, overvaluation, or a complicated mix of developmental factors. Whatever the origin, the narcissistic defense is built to keep shame out of awareness. Aging threatens that defense because it strips away some of the external proof the narcissist uses to feel superior, special, or untouchable. When shame begins leaking through, the person may become more attacking, not less. They may criticize others relentlessly because criticizing others helps them avoid feeling inferior. They may humiliate family members because contempt is easier than vulnerability. They may rewrite the past to preserve greatness because the truth feels unbearable. This creates enormous confusion for survivors who are trying to show compassion. Many people instinctively become more forgiving when they see an older person suffering. They tell themselves the narcissist is lonely, ill, insecure, or frightened. And sometimes all of that is true. But compassion without boundaries becomes a trap in narcissistic systems. The narcissist's suffering does not automatically make them safe. Their aging does not erase their capacity for manipulation. Their vulnerability does not necessarily produce empathy for yours. In fact, some narcissists become more exploitative when others feel sorry for them. They may use illness, age, fragility, or family obligation as tools to regain access and control. Survivors often need permission to recognize that feeling sorry for someone is not the same as trusting them. The question many people ask is whether narcissists can ever change. The honest answer is that change is possible in human beings, but it is rare when severe narcissistic patterns are deeply entrenched and protected. Real change would require insight, sustained accountability, willingness to tolerate shame, genuine remorse, consistency over time, and a commitment to relating to others as separate people with equal reality. That is a tremendous demand for someone whose entire personality structure has been built around avoiding those very capacities. Age alone does not create such a transformation. Pain alone does not create it either. Suffering does not automatically generate wisdom. Some people become wiser through suffering because they reflect. Others become more dangerous through suffering because they defend harder. Narcissists often fall into the second category unless there is unusual motivation and sustained therapeutic work. This is why hoping that an aging narcissist will finally become the parent, partner, or sibling you needed can keep you trapped for years. Hope can be beautiful when it is grounded in evidence. But false hope is one of the strongest chains in narcissistic relationships. Survivors postpone decisions, boundaries, grief, and healing because they are waiting for a future version of the narcissist who may never exist. They tell themselves that after retirement things will calm down. After the divorce is finalized, maybe the ex will become reasonable. After the children grow up, maybe the parent will stop competing. After illness, maybe they will soften. After one more conversation, maybe they will understand. But in many cases, the pattern does not resolve. It intensifies. The person you were waiting for does not arrive because they were never developing in that direction. There is deep grief in this realization. It is not only grief for the relationship you had. It is grief for the relationship you hoped for. It is grief for the apology that never came, the accountability that never emerged, the tenderness that should have been ordinary but always felt just out of reach. Many adult children of narcissists discover that one of the hardest parts of healing is giving up the fantasy of future repair. Not because they are cynical, but because they are finally seeing clearly. Once you stop waiting for a narcissist to become someone they have repeatedly shown no willingness to become, you recover energy. You stop organizing your life around their potential and start responding to their actual behavior. That shift can be heartbreaking, but it is often the beginning of freedom. For former romantic partners, the worsening of narcissistic traits with age can be equally devastating. A narcissistic spouse or ex-partner may become more vindictive, more controlling, and more consumed with image management as they age. If youth and desirability were central to their identity, they may react to aging with intensified cheating, flirting, cosmetic obsession, or contempt toward a long-term partner. If financial status was central, career setbacks or retirement may lead to rage, devaluation, and emotional abuse at home. Some aging narcissists cycle between grandiosity and collapse, acting superior one day and playing the wounded victim the next. This can keep partners emotionally hooked because the occasional signs of vulnerability appear sincere, even when they are quickly followed by blame and exploitation. Understanding the underlying pattern helps survivors stop confusing instability with remorse. In family systems, aging narcissists often rely heavily on guilt. As their options narrow and their need for control increases, they may invoke duty, sacrifice, culture, religion, illness, or age hierarchy to demand compliance. They may say things like, "After all I've done for you, you owe me, a good child would never do this," or "You'll regret this when I'm gone." These statements are powerful because they target conscience. Many survivors are not heartless people trying to avoid responsibility. They are deeply conscientious people who have been trained to equate self-betrayal with love. The older narcissist knows this. They know how to activate fear, guilt, and obligation. That is why boundaries with aging narcissists often feel emotionally harder, not easier, even when the abuse is clearer. One painful reality is that some narcissists become more overtly cruel because there are fewer consequences. Their social world may shrink to a circle of family members who have been conditioned to tolerate them. Outsiders may excuse the behavior due to age. The narcissist may feel licensed to say whatever they want because they believe no one will challenge an elder, a sick person, a parent, or a grandparent. Some weaponize frailty. Others weaponize tradition. Still others weaponize the idea that family must endure anything. This is how abuse can continue late into life, even after everyone involved recognizes the pattern. The survivor is then forced to confront not just the narcissist, but the family myths that have always protected them. At the same time, not every narcissist ages in exactly the same way. Some become more depressed than aggressive. Some retreat into isolation. Some cling desperately to image and remain superficially polished. Some cycle between love bombing and rage. Some become dependent and covert rather than openly domineering. Some lose social influence and respond with passive-aggressive sabotage instead of grand displays. But across these variations, the same theme often emerges. Unless there is genuine self-awareness, aging tends to intensify the insecurity, envy, rigidity, and dependence beneath the narcissistic structure. The specifics may vary, but the trajectory is often deterioration rather than growth. It is also important to distinguish between ordinary aging struggles and narcissistic patterns. Many older adults become more anxious, physically vulnerable, or emotionally sensitive for understandable reasons. Grief accumulates. Friends die. Bodies hurt. Independence changes. Cognitive challenges can emerge. None of that automatically means someone is narcissistic or abusive. The issue is not whether an older person is difficult, sad, proud, or even sharp-tongued at times. The issue is the enduring pattern: chronic entitlement, lack of empathy, exploitation, control, inability to take accountability, deep envy, image obsession, manipulation, and the use of others as extensions of self. When those traits intensify with age, survivors often feel in their body that they are not dealing with normal elder stress. They are dealing with an old wound system that has become more rigid and more exposed. Many survivors also wonder whether cognitive decline can make narcissism worse. It certainly can complicate things. When impulse control drops or social filters weaken, pre-existing traits may become more visible. A person who once managed their image carefully may become blunter, meaner, or more openly paranoid. But again, cognitive decline does not create character from nowhere. It may reveal or amplify what was already there. For family members, this can be incredibly disorienting because they are trying to respond compassionately to genuine health changes while also protecting themselves from long-standing abuse dynamics. There is often no perfect answer. What matters is recognizing that illness and aging do not obligate anyone to endure psychological harm without boundaries. If you are dealing with an aging narcissist, one of the most healing shifts you can make is moving from explanation to strategy. Survivors often spend years trying to understand why the narcissist acts the way they do. That understanding can be useful, especially when it relieves self-blame. But insight alone is not enough. Eventually, the question has to become, given this pattern, what protects my peace? That may mean reducing contact, refusing circular arguments, limiting emotional disclosure, documenting interactions, sharing caregiving responsibilities rather than carrying them alone, or choosing low contact or no contact when necessary. It may mean grieving publicly accepted roles such as good daughter, loyal son, or devoted spouse because those roles were weaponized against you. Protection is not punishment. It is wisdom. It can also help to stop taking the aging narcissist's deterioration personally. This is one of the hardest but most liberating truths. If the narcissist becomes more bitter with age, it is not because you failed to love them well enough. It is not because you did not say the right words, set the right boundary, or find the perfect therapist for them. It is not because the family did not unite in the proper way. Pathology that goes untreated and unexamined often worsens. Patterns reinforced over decades deepen. Someone who has built a life around avoiding accountability will not be healed by your loyalty. Someone committed to denial will not be transformed by your understanding. Their decline is not proof of your inadequacy. This matters because narcissistic family systems train people to personalize everything. If the narcissist is angry, it must be your fault. If they are lonely, you must fix it. If they are dissatisfied, you must work harder. If they are aging badly, you must sacrifice more. Breaking that conditioning is essential. You can care about someone without carrying responsibility for their emotional evolution. You can acknowledge their pain without absorbing their projections. You can recognize their aging without surrendering your boundaries. And you can refuse to make your peace hostage to someone else's refusal to grow. There is also something deeply important to say about mourning. When people search for answers to why narcissists get worse with age, they are often not only looking for psychological information. They are looking for permission to accept what hurts. They are confronting the end of fantasy. They are seeing that age did not bring the redemption arc they quietly expected. That is a loss. It deserves to be named. You may be grieving a living person, a role, a hope, or the emotional home you never really had. That grief can feel complicated because the narcissist may still be alive, still calling, still criticizing, still demanding. But mourning does not require death. It requires truth. Once you allow yourself to tell the truth about who the person is and is not, healing becomes more possible. For many survivors, part of healing involves redefining compassion. Real compassion is not enabling. It is not self-erasure. It is not staying available for mistreatment because the other person is old, lonely, or scared. Real compassion includes truth, discernment, and care for self. It can coexist with distance. It can include structured support rather than emotional enmeshment. It can involve making practical arrangements for an elder while refusing intimate access. It can mean contributing to care without becoming the narcissist's emotional dumping ground. This is especially important in cultures or families where elders are idealized in ways that erase accountability. Respect does not require surrendering reality. The SEO question many readers ask directly is this: do narcissists get worse with age? The most grounded answer is that many do, especially when their identity is built on external validation and they have spent a lifetime avoiding self-reflection. Aging threatens their supply, exposes long-term consequences, intensifies envy, hardens defenses, and reduces their ability to maintain the mask. As a result, they may become more bitter, more controlling, more paranoid, more entitled, and more emotionally volatile. Not every narcissistic person will look exactly the same in later life, and not every difficult older adult is a narcissist. But in severe or long-standing narcissistic patterns, age often brings deterioration rather than emotional growth. Another common question is whether an aging narcissist knows what they are doing. The answer is complicated. Some behaviors are highly intentional. Many narcissists know exactly how to guilt, punish, triangulate, provoke, or manipulate when they feel threatened. At the same time, they may not have the kind of integrated self-awareness that would allow them to fully grasp the depth of harm they cause. They may understand outcomes without understanding themselves. They may know how to regain control but not recognize the shame and emptiness driving their behavior. This distinction can matter clinically, but for survivors the practical issue is simpler. Whatever the internal mechanism, the impact is real. You do not need full certainty about intent in order to protect yourself from harm. People also ask whether loneliness ever softens narcissists. Sometimes loneliness makes people more grateful, more honest, and more open. But loneliness and narcissism can become fuel for grievance rather than growth. An isolated narcissist may not think, "I miss connection, perhaps I need to change." They may think, "People have abandoned me, I deserve more, everyone is selfish." Without insight, loneliness can deepen resentment. The narcissist then reaches for the same tactics that created the isolation in the first place: blame, guilt, control, idealization, devaluation, or emotional coercion. This is one reason reconciliation attempts with aging narcissists often fail. The loneliness looks like openness, but underneath it may still be entitlement. What helps survivors most is often not one breakthrough conversation, but a new framework. Instead of expecting reciprocity, they learn to expect patterns. Instead of arguing with distortions, they disengage. Instead of proving innocence, they stop entering the courtroom. Instead of trying to be understood, they focus on being clear. Instead of waiting for empathy, they practice acceptance. This does not mean they stop caring. It means they stop negotiating with reality. They begin building a life based on what is true now, not on what they wish would become true someday. That shift can restore enormous psychological energy. If you are reading this because you are watching a parent, partner, or relative become more narcissistic with age, you are not imagining what you see. It is common for survivors to doubt themselves because society romanticizes aging and family. People say, "They're old, be patient, that's just how elders are," or "you only get one mother." These phrases can shut down reality. But your nervous system often knows the difference between ordinary difficulty and chronic emotional harm. If someone's aging has made them more controlling, more punishing, more manipulative, more jealous, or more openly contemptuous, your confusion makes sense. Narcissistic patterns often become clearer over time because both the person's defenses and the family's denial begin to crack. It is also worth noting that survivors themselves often grow with age in ways the narcissist does not. Adult children become parents and suddenly see their own childhood differently. Former partners recover enough to name abuse more clearly. Distance, therapy, education, and healthier relationships give survivors new language. So part of what makes the aging narcissist seem worse is that you may be seeing more accurately than before. You are no longer interpreting cruelty as stress, control as love, or guilt as duty. Clarity is not disloyalty. It is consciousness. And once consciousness arrives, the old family story becomes much harder to tolerate. In the end, the deeper reason narcissists often get worse with age is simple, even if the experience is devastating. Time does not heal what someone refuses to face. Age does not improve what someone is committed to denying. Maturity does not come automatically to people who reject reflection, accountability, humility, and genuine empathy. If a person spends a lifetime protecting the false self through blame, control, and external validation, then aging, with all its losses and limitations, will likely destabilize them rather than deepen them. What might humble a healthy person may enrage a narcissist. What might produce tenderness in one person may produce bitterness in another. The difference is not age itself. The difference is whether the person has built a real self capable of truth. That is why the most healing conclusion for survivors is often not about the narcissist at all. It is about reclaiming your own life. You may not be able to stop an aging narcissist from becoming more bitter, more difficult, or more controlling. But you can stop organizing your future around the hope that they will one day become safe. You can grieve what is real. You can honor your limits. You can choose boundaries over guilt, clarity over confusion, and peace over endless emotional negotiation. And perhaps most importantly, you can recognize that their worsening with age is not a referendum on your worth. It is the predictable outcome of a psyche that chose defense over growth, image over truth, and control over love for far too long.